Hello, my name is Herbert Torres, and I will be presenting on Dark Winds. This poster board presentation will provide content analysis of episodes 1 through 4 on Dark Winds. I will be analyzing the gender and race differences by examining how law enforcement treats different individuals in Dark Winds. I will also be touching upon intimate partner violence revealed throughout these episodes. It is drastically important to examine these issues due to growing concerns of issues in the real world. In today's society, racial disparities affect many American everyday lives, including their wealth, education, employment, housing, health, and rates of incarceration. Racial inequality has been a long-faced problem. Non-white Americans were severely disadvantaged by Jim Crow laws and other formal and informal policies enforcing segregation. These laws and informal policies were made to marginalize non-white Americans and prevent them from having the right to vote. Another strong rising concern in today's society is gender equity. When women have been continuously underrepresented and marginalized for decades now. Women were used to be denied the right to vote, as well as would have little to no say in society, while taking on the role of stay-at-home wives, while the man is working to provide for the family. These views were known as patriarchy, a system of which men hold primary authority and control over role definitions of power. The first wave of feminism was considered to begin with the commencement of the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848. This movement brought together about 300 men and women who protested for the equality of men to be recognized. Ultimately, women began gaining little recognition with the passing of the 19th Amendment in 1920, which granted women the right to vote. Here I will be talking about intimate partner violence revealed throughout Dark Winds. During the first episode of Dark Winds, a young pregnant Indigenous woman came to the doctors to check up on her baby's health and well-being. During the visit, the nurse assisting the doctor was translating for the patient. After having talked to the doctor, the nurse came closer to the patient to discuss the options for her soon-to-be-due baby. It is at this point that the nurse realizes there is serious bruising on the patient's wrist. At this point, the nurse proceeds to ask the woman, "Where do you live? Where is the baby's father?" The woman dismissively responds, "I have to go, thank you," and proceeds to hurry out. The next day, tribal police go to further investigate this matter by asking to speak to Sally at her residence. The lady who opened the door claimed there was no Sally within the residence. Sergeant Manuelito noticed that Sally was actually inside the residence hiding. Once brought out for questioning, Sergeant Manuelito proceeded to follow up on the well-being of Sally. She proceeded to ask if she felt safe where she lived. When asked this, Sally unsurely responds, "I'm fine, officer," and proceeds to ask, "Can I go now?" She also questioned Sally about how many live within the residence, which she claimed to be only her and her mother. These dismissive responses reveals that Sally was not being truthful. The officer proceeded to ask some final questions, including where the baby's father lived. Sally explained the father does not live with them and only comes by occasionally. This is later disproved when the officer leaves. The scene cuts back inside Sally's home, and we can see that there is a man with a rifle ready for any unwanted person to come in, revealing that Sally has lied to tribal officers about her unsafe situation. A possible explanation for this unusual behavior could be due to a very important theory developed called the battered woman syndrome. Learned helplessness and violence are two concepts that combine to create the battered woman syndrome. According to Walker, battering occurs in repeating cycles, each containing three phases: the tension building stage, acute battering stage, and the honeymoon stage. The tension building involves arguments leading up to the battery. The second stage is the actual battery itself. The third stage is when the man shows regret and promises to change. This repeated cycle could be the explanation for why victims stay in abusive relationships. As Walker describes, learned helplessness is a form of early response reinforcement that trains women what they are able to control and what they are not able to control. Or it is a psychological condition that makes women feel helpless to affect positive change in their lives. Learned helplessness has been described as a subcategory for post-traumatic stress disorder. I will be discussing an academic article on intimate partner violence, causes and prevention. In her article, Rachel Jewell goes on to discuss the many causes of IPV and how to possibly prevent these scenarios from taking place. Intimate partner violence is a concerning issue that is very common all around the world. It is known that about 7 million children live in families where severe partner violence is present, and about 1 in 4 women report domestic abuse within the relationship. IPV can appear for a number of reasons, from alcoholism to poverty. Alcoholism is a substance that can be sold to any adult with an ID who is not prohibited of doing so. It is commonly known that alcohol rises levels of aggression. Aggression and added on stress factors can be a build-up leading to IPV. Another underlying factor of intimate partner violence can be poverty. According to Gels, violence and poverty are linked through masculine identity. As a result of lack of success, he argued, men living in poverty would take it out on women, which in turn would lead to women being beaten. Due to the failed task of being unable to live up to their manhood, society has implemented social norms for the longest. In a patriarchal system, men are in charge and are seen as a provider and the leader of the relationship. Not being able to live up to these expectations leads to finding other forms of control or power, which includes the battery of women. Men become violent towards women when they cannot control or economically support when violence against women because of social norm. It is easy to see that violence against women is rooted in male vulnerability, resulting from social expectations of manhood that are unattainable due to these factors, such as poverty that men face. Violence against women can also be the result of male identity crisis. Another possible underlying factor for causes of IPV can be social norms implemented at a young age. In the article, it is said that the integrational cycling of violence has been documented in many settings. The sons of women who are beaten are more likely to beat their inmate partners, and in some settings, to have been beaten themselves as children. These daughters, the daughters of the women who are beaten, are more likely to be beaten as adults. Women who are beaten in childhood by parents are also more likely to be abused by intimate partners as adults, says Jules. This conveys that young children exposed to these acts of violence have a high probability of using these acts of violence on their significant other, caused by the normalization of it. Finally, the author goes on to discuss another possible factor that can cause domestic violence within relationships. Jukes concludes that empowered women are less likely to be affected by IPV, and it is that women with low empowerment that suffer from these abusive relationships. Power can be achieved through many sources such as education, income, and community roles. Females that lack these empowerments and high levels of self-respect outside and inside the home will be largely more at risk of abuse. I will be talking about a second academic source on intimate partner violence, the health consequences of intimate partner violence. This article sets out to reveal the detrimental effects of intimate partner violence on psychological and physical health. Among the mental health consequences of intimate partner violence, depression and post-traumatic stress disorder are prevalent. Trauma buildup from these violent moments can leave many individuals with severe hardships. In a study conducted, researchers found that intimate partner violence is associated with higher rates of depression and post-traumatic stress disorder than childhood abuse. This goes to show how severe IPV is and how it can damage an individual's development. It is stated that in the article that abused women are at risk of significant rise in anxiety, insomnia, and social dysfunction than those that are not abused, with physical violence having a stronger effect than psychological abuse. Aside from the many psychological problems faced by battered women, IPV also comes with a number of physical health problems that can be detrimental in the long term. In the article, it is stated that the injuries, fear, and stress associated with intimate partner violence can result in chronic health problems, such as chronic pain, example, headaches, back pain, or recurring central nervous system symptoms, including fainting and seizures. This continues to show the many health consequences of intimate partner violence. I will now be talking about intersectionality within dark minds. Intersectionality is a theory that claims our everyday lives are shaped by our identity factors, including gender, race, economic class, and heteronormativity. Oppression based on identification aspects has been a long growing problem. The lives of people within the United States are constantly affected by whether you are a male, female, black, or white, and if you are rich or poor. It is known that the US has had its long share of history with oppression in colored people. It has also marginalized women for the longest. The newly growing concern in today's era would be gender classification, the constant judgment of heteronormativity. We can see how individuals can be advantaged and disadvantaged in many ways on aspects they have no power of controlling. We can see vivid examples of this while analyzing how different characters are treated throughout Dark Winds. The first clear representation of unfair treatment based on identification aspects was in episode 1 of Dark Winds. During this episode, the FBI were trying to solve a case on the fatal bank heist that had taken place recently. These bank robbers escaped on a helicopter and were seen headed over the territory of Navajo, which is out of jurisdiction to pursue. Lieutenant Leaphorn, in charge of Navajo Tribal Police, assured the FBI he did not believe it was one of his people who committed this crime, as the helicopter would be easily spotted in the small town. The FBI were persistent on the fact that they believed it was a Native American. They perceived that the people of Navajo were seen as criminals, simply for having a different type of society. During the same time, 2 Native Americans were found deceased in a hotel room one night. One young girl and one old man, with one blind survivor in the room. Foul play was suspected. The town of Navajo was grieving as they had lost 2 well-known individuals. Homicide is outside of Navajo police jurisdiction and would be turned over to the FBI to solve. This made the grieving families more furious, as the mother of the young girl knew that the FBI would show little to no interest in solving this homicide case. After Lieutenant Leaphorn explains this to the mother of the dead girl, she goes on to say, "Since when did the FBI give a damn about a dead Indian?" As presumed, the FBI decided to continue prioritizing the bank heist due to the payout reward they would receive for turning in these robbers. FBI even went as far as sending an undercover FBI agent into Navajo Tribal Police to pose as a regular new deputy to gather intel on the people of Navajo in the goal of ultimately finding these criminals. The new deputy seemed to be getting more involved with the homicide case. That is when the person in charge of him warned him of what they were really there for, which was to solve the bank heist, and the goal of being confiscated a new huge reward. The FBI agents are putting their wants and needs over the safety and well-being of innocent lives. The homicide case of 2 Native American Indians was put to the side. The chain of events goes on to show that marginalization of certain groups and disadvantages they are faced with. The town of Navajo knew off the bat that the FBI would not care about these 2 people being found dead in a small town, due to the simple fact that they were Native American. Intersectionality is vividly present with the oppression of these Native American Indians. I will be now discussing patriarchy within Dark Winds. Patriarchy is defined as a society in which men hold the power and privilege. Men hold all authority, and men make and enforce the rules. This social concept has been traced back to thousands of years. Only recently have we started to denormalize the social view. We can see a clear depiction of patriarchy revealed in episode 3 of Dark Winds. During this episode, Sally's unsafe situation at home is very clear by now. The nurse has invited Sally to stay for a couple of days at her house, and she accepts. When having a reassuring conversation, Sally goes on to ask the nurse why she had not chosen to have any more kids. The nurse tells Sally that she was unable to have any more kids due to the fact that she had an operation done on her to prevent her from doing so. She admitted to Sally that she had no say in having this operation, and it was done behind her back by the father. To think of how traumatizing it must be to wake up from giving birth to find out that you are never going to be able to have a kid again is truly devastating. This nurse was stripped of a huge decision and aspect of life from her. Even if life moved on from her and she did not stay with this man, she is now unable to reproduce and start a new life. She is instead stuck in a nightmare. The nurse decided to stay with this man despite of the several hardships faced with him. She continued to be by his side and care for him. This event conveys that this nurse lived and or lives within a patriarchal societal view. The man went on to make a life-altering decision without her consent or knowledge. This manipulation imposes on women can have long-term psychological effects. Women within these type of societies face constant oppression and are constantly having their mental health deteriorated. That is all. Thank you for listening.